We begin tonight with some new details in the Mark Norman case. The Vice-Admiral is retiring after he and the government reached a, quote, mutually acceptable agreement. Norman was suspended back in January of 2017 and subsequently charged with breach of trust over the alleged leaking of cabinet documents. Back in May, Crown prosecutors stayed the charge. Murray Brewster is here tonight. He has more. He's been looking at this all through the saga. It's a complicated one, Murray, but walk us through the latest details we have today.
Well, Heather, what we have when the government says it has a mutually acceptable agreement, what that means is mutually acceptable is Admiral Norman gets some kind of settlement and he retires from the military, and possibly this whole controversy goes away. We don't have any details about precisely what was settled upon, what kind of money is involved. We don't know what kind of information and agreement that Admiral Norman has made. We don't even know what the retirement date is right now, because we've been speaking with folks over at the Defense Department. They say a retirement date has not been set, but they do emphasize that Admiral Norman will get his full pension and that all of the details are confidential. Now, that's really important because at the end of the criminal case against him, Admiral Norman made it very clear that he had a story to tell to the public and he wanted to tell it. He has given one interview which was about the personal side, but there are a number of unanswered questions about this case, about how the second most powerful member of the Canadian military became involved in a case where there were allegations of political interference, where there were allegations that leaks took place, leaks of cabinet secrets. There are a number of unanswered questions that are hanging over this case.
And will those ever be answered, or is this effectively the end of this?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily the end of it, in the sense that because while the allegations of political interference were refuted by both the government and the Crown at the time, they've continued to linger, and they could potentially linger into the federal election campaign because there was nothing actually proven in court. There was no evidence presented one way or another. So that could be politically significant going forward. There are also questions about the handling of the RCMP investigation, because the Crown withdrew the case because it didn't have evidence that the defense had ended up presenting to it. I mean, the defense came forward with fresh evidence. So why didn't the Crown have that evidence to begin with? Both the House of Commons and the Senate have declined to hold hearings into this and investigate it. So from, at least from an investigative point of view, it appears to be over, but I think there's going to be a number of questions that are going to be asked politically.
Okay, we'll put one of these questions to the Public Safety Minister a little bit later on in the program, but thank you, Murray, for beginning things there. Murray Brewster with me here in studio.
I'm just happy that the process has drawn to a conclusion, and in the statement that was released, the government wished the Vice-Admiral well in his future endeavors.
Vice-Admiral Mark Norman is retiring from the Canadian Armed Forces. As Murray Brewster reported at the top of the program today, the senior naval officer will not return to his previous role as Deputy Chief of Defense Staff. A joint statement by Norman and the federal government says the parties reached a mutual agreement. So, is this the end of the more than 2-year legal saga over alleged leaked information involving a supply ship? Let's turn to our power panel. Tonight in Toronto, Amanda Alvaro of Pomp and Circumstance. And in Ottawa, Summa Strategies' Tim Powers and Kathleen Monk from Earnscliffe Strategy Group. Hello, 3 friends. This is fantastic for my first power panel. You will excuse me if I say good morning by mistake to the 3 of you. I got to get used to this time zone. Anyway, it's great to have you here all tonight. And Amanda, let me start with you. On the Norman affair, what do you make of how this controversy has seemingly come to an end?
Well, I don't think it's entirely unexpected. I think that a settlement was obviously expected. And the question was, would it remain confidential? Would it be a more public settlement? But like the private sector, many of these settlements are private in nature, are confidential in nature. So it's no surprise that this one is as well. I don't think it brings the story to a neat conclusion. I don't think that there's a bow that can be tied around it. Certainly, Mark Norman and his family have been through a tremendous amount. So for them, I'm sure there. It provides some sense of closure. The opposition certainly doesn't seem like they're ready to throw in the towel on this one. So I'm sure that over the coming months as we head into the election, we'll hear it pop up again. But the fact that it's confidential, I think, does provide some closure for the government as well. It means that, you know, all of the information that's embedded in that, and likely the fact that he will not then publicly tell his story, I imagine that's probably part of the settlement, really tempers how far the government will have to go in terms of what they'll have to say about it.
Well, Kathleen, then to you, to pick up on what Amanda suggested, that this is something that perhaps the opposition will continue to return to during the campaign. I mean, does it become coupled with other cases of political interference that have been discussed, or how do you see this playing out, if at all, during the campaign?
No, for sure. I mean, the question that's on everybody's mind in Ottawa right now is for sure, what was the settlement, how much? Maybe we won't get all those details, but it will have to be reflected somewhere in the books at some moment. But so while the Liberals have avoided certainly that kind of drama of the political trial, and now they've gotten that settlement, I don't think they've avoided all of the trouble they'll face on the election trail, and the kind of the shadow that not only the Mark Admiral Norman casts on the campaign trail, but also how it links back to SNC-Lavalin, and just generally how the Liberals in these two instances were seen to be leveraging corporate ties, essentially. So it will come up again.
It will. And Tim, from your perspective as well, I mean, the political implications of all of this. I spoke to Minister Goodale earlier. He wouldn't comment on whether there was any review going on, wouldn't say anything other than to wish him well and thank him for his service. But are there ongoing political implications here?
Well, Heather, you set a new record. It's been 3 hours since the decision, and this is Ottawa, the most gossipy town in the country, and nobody knows it yet. So well done for you that hasn't broken yet, although I'm sure you prefer it would break. Sure, there's political implications, as Amanda and Kathleen both said. The story will be the bigger exercise that Admiral Norman went through, the suggestion that there was improper influence and what the government did or didn't do and who was involved and why certain ministers left. That's not going to go away. But I do think at some point we'll find out. It might be your colleague, Murray Brewster, who's very good going through the records of public accounting, because there will have to be somewhere a recognition of discretionary spending. And whether they speak to this specifically or they speak to it in general terms, I think eventually we'll find out. I think also it was totally implausible to see Admiral Norman, despite his stated desire to go back into the military, to go back in. I mean, this was the body that was working against him for the last 2 years. So how they would have ever mended those fences and worked coherently and cogently together, I don't think was ever able to be seen by the rest of us.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video. Thanks for watching.